Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Septa Forward Bus Revolution. This is our fifth transit talk. My name is Beverly Harper. I'm president of Portfolio Associates and part of the engagement team for this huge project. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what's on the agenda for this evening. We'll get a welcome from Septa, project and a project update, and then introduction to network options, and then a little bit about what's next. But before that, I want to give you a few technology reminders. The session is being recorded. Your mic is muted, and your camera is not turned on. We had almost 400 people who registered for this session, and right now we have about 150, almost 150 people who are in the session. If you need translation, there's a feature that offers live transcript. You can see that at the bottom of your screen. So we do have an IT team who's with us this evening. If you have an issue or a problem, you can put it in the Q&A. I can't promise that will help. We all know what technology is, and sometimes we absolutely cannot fix it. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dan Nemroff, who is the manager of planning and programs for Septa, and he's been on this journey with us since we started about 2 years ago, Dan?
No, just a year. It hasn't been that long.
Oh boy, seems like 2 years.
Yeah, it's a lot of additional white hairs, but it's only been a year.
And you say that to me?
Fair enough. Good evening, everybody. Really happy to be joining you at this juncture in the project. As Bev said, my name is Dan Nemroff. I'm the manager of planning programs here at Septa, and I'm in the Office of Strategic Planning and Analysis, and I am the project manager for Bus Revolution, the redesign of the entire Septa system, being supported by a great consulting team and just tons of support from Septa staff and our partners at the city and our counties. Go to the next slide.
We have a, go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, go ahead. We're going to give a project approach. I'm going to give a project update. We're going to talk a little bit about where we've been for the last year, because we are at about the 1 year anniversary. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can find online, and I'm going to hand it off to Bethany, who's going to give a more detailed explanation of the 2 network options that we rolled out this morning. As a lot of you probably know, we spent much of 2021 doing a deep dive into the current bus network. There were a lot of documents and reports that we put out on our project website. And we also did a ton of engagement in the fall, and that can be found in some summary materials. And we also did deep dives into all of our bus routes. So we have 125 bus routes in the city and suburbs, and we did a really detailed analysis of all of the bus routes. This is supported by a route dashboard as well as a map inventory. So you can find all of this information still on our website at septa-busrevolution.com. And I just want to note that even though we've definitely sort of moved past this part of the project into phase 2, we are still happy to get feedback on all of these reports, hear what you think. If there are ideas in the route evaluations, or there's things in one of the reports that you find particularly interesting, or you like or you dislike, please let us know. We are still taking input and feedback on all of these reports, and we're happy to hear what you think. Next slide. As we wrap up, I guess, the first quarter of this year, we're heavily into the scenario development phase, or to share these two network options. The technical team has been really busy for the last few months, reviewing some of the input, reviewing some of the feedback we've gotten on the existing conditions work, and using some of that input as well as the technical analysis that we've done to develop these two network options that we are sharing tonight. We are going to then have 2 months of engagement that will wrap up in June, and then begin work on a set of a draft preferred network, which we'll bring back out to the public in the fall. And then we'll begin the implementation process in 2023. Next slide. I just want to remind everyone that Bus Revolution is a key component of Septa Forward, our updated strategic plan, and that there are some other real important tentpole projects that are really all moving Septa towards this lifestyle transit network that is a sort of more useful, more effective, and more people can use for more purposes. So the other projects are Project Metro and Reimagining Regional Rail. Next slide. And then finally, I want to specifically call out Reimagining Regional Rail, because in a few weeks, you'll start seeing different scenarios that team is putting out there. And that project and this project, while they seem a little different, and they are talking about different modes for sure, we are working together to kind of best integrate our system in the short term and the long term for all of our customers. So, if you're on this call, you probably use the bus network. Maybe you don't use regional rail, maybe you don't think it's something that's for you, but we are really moving towards a more fully integrated system, and we'd really love to hear what you think, even if you aren't a regional rail customer, just like they're going to want to hear what bus customers think as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Bethany, who's going to talk more about the network options that we're sharing.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Bethany Whitaker. I work for Nelson Nygaard. We are the lead firm on the consultant team that's been working with Septa and all of the stakeholders. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the network options and tell you a little bit about them, how we got there. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Keaton Wetzel, and he's going to show you how you can really dive in and take a deep look at each of the two network options, compare them, contrast them, and then fill out a survey to tell us what you think. And before I get started, I just want to let everybody know that we're showing two options. And what we're really interested in hearing from you is what you like about network option 1, what you like about option 2, what you don't like about them, and then our approach is that we're going to take those comments, the best parts of network option 1 and the best parts of 2, and try to build on that to move to that draft recommendation that we're going to bring to you later in the fall. So to get started, what I wanted to do is when this team, as Dan mentioned, we've been really working hard with not just the technical team, but a lot of SEPTA staff and a lot of folks from the city of Philadelphia and the counties. But before we really started to put the networks together, or the draft networks together, we took a step back and we said, all right, what is it that we're really trying to achieve? What are our key goals? And we had a couple of workshops. We spent a lot of time thinking about that. And we came up with 3 things that are our highest priorities. One is putting the rider first. And when we say that, what we mean is we want to create a system that works well for folks, that it's easy to use, easy to understand, it's well integrated, you can move between modes, you can transfer between buses. It's just super simple and easy to use, and it's an attractive mode for as many people as possible. The second goal is really about increasing access to opportunity. And what we mean by this is we want to make sure people, of course, can get to jobs, but also do other things that are important to daily life, like go shopping or visit family and friends or go to the doctor's appointment. And just make sure that, the network's really oriented around all kinds of trips. And when we talk about increasing access to opportunity, we're also taking a very intentional step to try to make things, make travel and transportation easier for some targeted groups who have been historically marginalized. So we're talking about racial minorities, people with low incomes, and households with 0 vehicles. So I'm going to show some data on how the two networks impact a couple of those targeted groups. But really, when we're talking about access to opportunity, we're talking about all kinds of trips. And really focused on the people that have been left out of previous network designs. The other thing is about building trust and reliable service. This came directly from you all. We heard it loud and clear time and time again that creating a network that people can trust and that will get them to where they want to go on time is front and center of what we should be focusing on. So with those goals in mind, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about a couple of our starting points. The first one, and a very important one, is that all three network options, so Septa's existing network, network option 1, which I'll talk about in a second, and option 2, they all cost just about the exact same amount. So we, whether you talk about money or revenue hours or bus hours or however you want to measure it, they cost about the same. And then when we set out to, we had our eye on those 3 goals, and both networks are really intended to be simpler, to be frequent, to be reliable, and then to just really be a better quality of service for more riders. So a couple of other things that I just wanted to talk about. One is you'll hear me, and of course Keaton as well, we'll be talking about bus routes as a max, like a 10 max or a 15 max. When we use that term, it's a term that Septa actually has developed before they started the bus revolution to try to communicate some of the way the services work. But the max means it's the maximum time between buses. So a 10 max route will arrive at least every 10 minutes. At some times of the day, it may be more frequent than that, but it will never be less frequent than that. Another key thing about the way that we're talking about the routes, and again, this is for all of them, 10, 15, 30, and 60, is when it is at that service level, it will operate at that service level all day, every day. So from when it starts in the morning and ends in the evening, many of the bus routes will also extend late into the evening or early morning. We're still going to have owl routes, but the frequency won't be at late night. But from early morning into the evening, it will run at a 10 max service level all day, 7 days a week. So weekdays and weekend days, that's a big change for the network. You'll see how some of that works. And then I also wanted to just talk a little bit about, you'll hear both me and Keaton and probably Dan as well, talk about frequent bus service. When we use the word frequent, what we mean is a bus route that operates every 15 minutes or better. So another thing that is new about the bus revolution or the network options is this idea of, or a proposal for microtransit. When we use the word microtransit, what we're talking about is a flexible public transportation service that is on demand. So we are taking, this is a type of transit service that's being used around the country, and it really builds on some of the technology and lessons from services like Uber and Lyft. So what it allows you to do is, if you're in a microtransit zone and you want to take a trip, you can give Septa a call or use your smartphone or your computer and say, hey, I'm in Norristown, I want to get to the Norristown Transportation Center, and you schedule the ride. They say, we'll be, can you walk to this corner? We'll pick you up in 30 minutes. A vehicle will arrive. It will be an accessible vehicle and it will bring you to your destination. You'll see, and we'll talk about this, and again, Keaton's going to show you some examples, but we are proposing microtransit in some of the areas where we know we have high needs. We have low-income riders. We have some of those target groups that we're talking about, but the density of the land use is low. And so the fixed route buses have not been as successful. So this is an alternative service model that we're exploring and offering to you. And you'll even see in our survey, there's some specific questions about microtransit. So with that, I'm going to talk about network option 1. Network option 1 is the simplest of the 2 network options. It has, I'm going to have to just move this. So you should be able to see Septa currently has about 125 bus routes. Network option 1 has 93. So that's quite a few less routes, almost 30. But some of those routes have been replaced with microtransit service. So there is some balancing there. Another key thing about this network is the level of frequency. So more than half of all the bus routes in network option 1 operate as a frequent bus route, so 15 minutes or better. The bus routes are also straighter and they're more direct. It creates some opportunities to travel in the region, make it a little bit easier, and we feel like the service quality and coverage in the suburbs is primarily delivered through microtransit. So there's some advantages with that. There are some disadvantages with the network, primarily that there is less fixed route service overall. You'll, again, as I mentioned, you'll especially see that in the suburban areas. In some cases, there will be longer walks for some customers. We've thinned out the network a lot, so there are fewer routes. Those routes come more frequently, but in some cases, you'll have to walk further to get to them. Likewise, in some cases, there will be fewer one-seat rides for some customers. And again, where the frequent service makes it easier to transfer, but there will be more transfers in this network. So I'm going to show you a picture of it. This is network option 1. You can see from the picture, and I know it's really hard to really understand what the network option, what it is and how the bus routes work, but Keaton's going to show you how you can take a little bit more of a deep dive into that. And with this talk, we're really trying to set you up and encourage you to dive in and learn more. And then we're also going to talk about how you can find us and talk more about about what we've got to show you here. But a couple key things here. One is that you will see there are no bus routes in this network that operate less frequently than 30 minutes. And so that was something that we did intentionally. We thought if there is demand and ridership and need for bus service, if we can't support 30-minute service, then we're going to use microtransit, or we're not going to provide service at all. So you have these 13 microtransit zones are these gray areas. These microtransit zones are intended for local travel and also connections to the fixed route network. And then you see all of the teal green lines are the 30-minute service. And you can see in the city of Philadelphia, there are fewer bus routes, but they're all 10 max and 15 max routes. And you can see how we tried to create a nice clean grid that's easy to understand, easy to use, and people can travel straight through and get to their destinations. So I'm also going to just show a couple of quick statistics because I know I have a lot of information about how this impacts people. There's a few things that we're measuring. One is the number of people that live within a quarter mile of a frequent bus route, and we compare it to the existing network. So the gray is the existing bus network and the blue is what we're proposed. So you can see weekdays at noon, there is about 400,000 more people will be within a quarter mile of a frequent bus route. At 5 p.m., there is some gain. Septa has a lot of service on the route, on the streets at 5 p.m. So while we are able to reach more people, not quite as many, not quite as big of a gain, but you see a huge gain on the weekend days. Saturday, there's currently about 1 million people who are within a quarter mile. We're going to increase that to 1.8. And then likewise, Sunday is a big gain. Jobs, also very similar story. Weekdays at noon, network option 1 provides more access to frequent bus routes. Weekdays at 5, yes, there's a little bit more. It's not quite as big. But then Saturday, almost twice as many jobs are within a quarter mile of a frequent bus route. And Sunday, it's more like 3 times as many. So those are some of the things that are interesting and attractive about network option 1. But again, I didn't go into too many details. We'll show you how you can learn a little bit more. Network option 2 is also a high frequent network, but it has more bus routes. And so the trade-off that we made with this network is that we kept more service on the streets in the city of Philadelphia, but also in the suburban areas. This network has 109 routes. About a third of them qualify as frequent bus routes. And then we have 9 microtransit zones. So the advantage is more routes. In some cases, they're going to be shorter walks. There'll be more one-seat rides. And then there's more fixed route service on those regional corridors and in some of the suburban areas. But it does come at a cost, which is there is less frequency overall. The network's a little bit more complicated, and there is a little bit more service duplication. So when you look at the network, what you will see is some yellow routes, which mean these are the bus routes that will operate hourly. You still see some microtransit out in the suburban areas. As you get closer to the urbanized area, a lot of 30-minute service. And then there's fewer 10 max routes, but quite a few 15 max routes that are still left. And you see those a lot in the city of Philadelphia and areas just around outside. And then when we look at some of the statistics that we just showed, you can see there's still some gains on weekdays at the noon hour, at 5 p.m. And again, some big gains for people who have access, who live within a quarter mile of a frequent bus route. There's about 600,000 additional people that live within a quarter mile at Saturday at noon, and then almost 4 times as many Sunday at noon. And when you look at jobs, again, same kind of story. Some gains at weekdays at noon, and then at 5 p.m. a little bit, not too much, but Saturdays and Sundays, quite a few more jobs are within a quarter mile of a frequent bus route. And we feel like this is really access to that high frequency, high quality, reliable, easy to use, easy to understand service. So those are the two network options. I'm also going to spend a minute just comparing them with the existing network and showing you a little bit of the data. So just as a reminder, Septa currently has about 125 routes. Sometimes it's 126, depends on how you count it. Network option 1 has 93. In network option 2, we added a lot of that service back in. We're up to 109 routes, but we have fewer frequent routes. In network option, Septa right now has no microtransit, but we have, we're proposing 13. In option 1, there's 9 in option 2. So I know there's going to be a lot of things that you like about each of these. And again, this is going to be a key part of what we're going to ask you to help us with. So just looking at some of these statistics again, residents within a quarter mile of a frequent bus routes, you can see how they compare. And as we've been talking a little bit about weekdays at noon, there's some gains, a little bit at 5 p.m., but the biggest, really significant gains on Saturday and Sunday. Same story with jobs. And then, as I mentioned, we also looked at racial minorities and looked at their access to frequent bus service and how the networks compared, the proposed networks compared with SEPTA's existing network. And you can see weekdays at noon, there's a little bit of a gain. It's consistent story. Weekdays at 5, a tiny bit here, and it looks like network option 2 is just a tiny bit worse. In terms of racial minorities who have access to a quarter mile of the frequent bus route, but Saturdays quite a bit more, Sundays a lot more. A lot of this population will have access to frequent bus service. And then similar story for low income or residents in poverty. So on weekdays, a little bit of a gain, just about even at 5 p.m., a little bit of a loss with network option 2, but on Saturdays, both with network option 1 or network option 2, there's a lot more low-income riders will be able to walk a quarter mile, get on a frequent bus route and get to where they want to go, and same story for Sunday. So with that, I'm going to just pause and just, let you think about that a little bit. I know I covered a whole bunch of information. I'm going to turn it over to Keaton. He's going to show you the networks and show you how you can learn a little bit more about each of them. And then we do have a Q&A. So when we come back, we can answer some of your questions and talk a little bit more. So Keaton, I'm going to stop sharing and then send it over to you.
Thanks, Bethany. Go ahead and pull up my browser here. All right, so as Bethany mentioned, we're presenting a lot of information. We want to make sure that everyone has the tools they need to understand the differences between the two network options and also how their route today that they take every day is changing across the two options. So the way we've done that is by putting the information into something called a story map. And the way to access the story map is from the project website. The project website, again, is septabusrevolution.com. And there's a link right now at the very top of the website, or you can click network options. There's another link on this page as well. And so when you view options, the story map comes up. And the story map is organized in 5 sections. And it begins with a recap of the information Bethany just presented about, what is the background of the project? I'm not going to go over this again because you all know it well at this point. And then a description again of the goals and how the goals are centered here in different ways across the two network options. And then dives right into the meat of the information. And so after a recap of how the network options are similar, again, these options are budget neutral. They're in general simplified, and they are in general are much more frequent and also have microtransit. It describes how they're different. And network option 1, there's a quick summary about how service is a minimum every 30 minutes throughout the network, and has a much larger 10 max network. And network option 2 has lower frequency service, but in general a shorter walk to service. So if you really want to dive into the two network options and understand how they're different and also understand what your route looks like, you scroll down to the comparing the network options section of the story map, and this is a really useful tool. So the story map begins with the most frequent service level. This again is the 10 max service. So these services for the bulk of the day operates at least every 10 minutes. we present that network scenario, sorry, network 1 is on the left, and you can drag the slider over and view that in more detail. And then network option 2 is on the right, and you can drag this option over and view that in more detail. And the map is useful because you can select individual routes. You can also pan, zoom, and view the map full screen. And so say I really want to take a deep dive into how the West Philadelphia 10-minute bus network is changing across the two scenarios, I can do that here. And so I can see if I really want to focus on network option 1, there's a new route here that operates from 69th Street Transportation Center into Center City via South Street. And that's operating at least 10 minutes all day. Network option 2, that's not part of the 10-minute option. And so again, this tool really allows you to understand the nuances between the two scenarios. And that's really what we are hoping interested folks like you all will dive into and give us a sense of what do you like better across the two networks. Another feature of this map is that it links to an existing map of the network. So as you scroll here, you'll see a number of options for you to download a map. And this is a very high res map of the existing bus network. And so this is how bus network looks today. So if you want to compare the existing network to the two network options, this is one way to do that. So moving forward with the less frequent service, we have a 15 max network. And so again, the 15 max network in network option 1 has fewer routes, but that's because far more of the frequent routes are 10 max. And then network option 2 has far more 15 max routes, and that's because fewer of those routes are 10 max. So again, this option allows you to pan and zoom. You can even go full screen if you want. And then again, you can click individual routes and see their full alignment if that interests you. So if you scroll through further, the next set of routes that's presented is the 30-minute network, which is referred to as 30 max. And the 30 max network extends throughout the suburbs, especially in network option 1. 30 max service is the maximum level of service frequencies in network option 1. And you can see really how far out into the region 30 max routes operate in network 1, and then in network option 2, also a large number of 30 max routes. So we really hope that you'll explore these in depth and understand the differences between the two. The final map presents the different ways that the two network options serve the suburbs. And as Bethany mentioned, one thing we're really trying to receive a lot of public feedback about is what solution riders see being the most useful for them to operate or to get around in these low density areas where it may be more difficult to take the bus. Maybe it's because the sidewalk network isn't really complete out there, or there isn't the density of residents and jobs to support a fixed route bus. The network options go about serving those low density areas in different ways. Network option 1 really focuses on operating 30-minute service where there is the density to support it. In those areas that don't have the density to support it, we're proposing a large network of microtransit zones, and there's 13 zones in network option 1. And again, these are clickable, and you can see the rough boundaries of these. And then in network option 2, we use a mix of microtransit zones and 60-minute routes. And so the trade-off here is that if folks are less comfortable with microtransit and prefer, doing what they do today and taking for the bus, they may have to wait up to 60 minutes for a bus, but it's more similar to the type of service that folks are taking today. So again, we hope that you'll really explore the options and all of the different service levels throughout the region. The next section of the story map, once you keep scrolling, provides, again, this strategy of microtransit, which we understand is a new type of service for many people. But if you've ever taken an Uber and Lyft ride, it's really not that different. It's just, in this case, operated by Septa, and you don't use the Uber or Lyft app to book the ride. You use a different app. And it provides sort of a breakdown of how it works compared to fixed route, and then ADA paratransit. If you use dial ride services today, it compares it to that. And then the story map then drives people to explore the network options in full. Or if you're not interested in that, you already know what you want to tell us, there's an option here to take our survey. But before I show you the survey link, I'm going to show you probably the most detailed tool on this story map if you really want to dive into more of the statistics of the route and also how they operate during different times of the day and different days of the week. And so that is done using these embedded maps that are called remix maps. So if you keep scrolling, there's a link that comes up, you click it to interact with the map. And the first map that's shown is network option 1. And this map is super detailed. So I'm just going to select a route here. This is in network option 1 referred to as Route 503. I think most of the folks on this call know this route as Route G. We, in these maps, have renamed routes with temporary names. This isn't at all intended to be the name that this route will turn into in the future. This is just the way that we're tracking the route internally. And we've done this because in some places routes have changed drastically. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense to give it the same number that it has today. So in order to verify, or in order to look up how your route is changing over the 2 network options, we've provided a tool here. And so say I want to see what the route G is referred to in the 2 network options. This lookup option just tells you that it's Route 503. And so the remix map shows what times of the day the route operates at different frequencies. And so you can see how it breaks down between weekdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And then also provides pretty interesting statistics about the number of folks that are within a quarter mile of the stops. And another tool I wanted to feature was that if you want to be able to see what your commute is going to look like across the network, or what your commute options are, there's a little icon here. Her name is Jane. And Jane is really useful because, say I'm a South Philly resident who lives here, I can plop Jane down, and the remix tool is going to think for a second. And it does take just a few seconds because it's a pretty large network. But what Jane will do is become the center of a potential commute. And the colors are differentiated based on how far you can travel within different travel times. So the darkest color is 15 minutes, and then it goes to 30 minutes, 45, and 60. And so that shows on network option 1 how far you can travel in that time frame. And then if I move to network option 2, you can do the same thing and just see how that commute varies between the 2 options. So again, I'm a South Philly resident. I'm going to plop Jane down, and I can see how my commute options really vary between the 2 networks. And that's, a function of the different levels of frequency and also the different densities of routes between the 2 networks. And so I just want to reiterate, we know that we're not going to necessarily pick between one of these 2 scenarios when we put together a final network option. What we're really asking folks to do is tell us, what do you like about network option 1 and what do you like about network option 2? And the final recommended scenario is going to be a combination of both. So we hope that the tools provided by the story map will allow you to take that deep dive into the 2 networks and really tell us what you like and dislike. And then finally, from the story map, we really want you to take our survey. This is the best way for you to tell us what you think of the 2 networks. And this is just a survey that's online on a different website. And if you leave us your telephone number or email address, we'll enter you in a drawing with a chance to win one of 10 $25 Visa gift cards. So we hope that's a good incentive to really be thoughtful here with your comments and tell us what you like. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the feedback we receive from the story map on the surveys, as well as the feedback we've received so far on the route profiles. I've received about 100 of those comments so far. And we're working closely with Septa and continuing public outreach to put together a final network that hopefully is a good combination of what you like about both of the network options.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Keaton. That was great. Just a couple things right now. It went live today. It's only available in English, but we are updating it so that it will be available in Spanish and Chinese. So that's coming. And what I wanted to do is just also kind of tell you guys a little bit about what's coming up in terms of the public engagement and where there's opportunities to sort of join the revolution, talk to us about what you're interested, what you like, what you don't like. If you have additional questions, if you want to learn more, we're available for the next 2 months for pretty much for the next couple of weeks in April, and then all of May and through the end of June, that we're going to be, the survey will be live. We're going to be doing a series of pop-ups at the bus stops. So that's where we'll be with tables and boards and some games for people to play. So you can talk to the team, learn about the bus network. We're hoping to reach a lot of riders that way. We also have a project bus that's going to be at some community events like Haitian Flag Day, some of the farmers markets, some of the Pride events, and it will be there. You'll see it, and hopefully you'll see it driving around on the street as well. But that's an opportunity for folks to, again, stop by, learn a little bit more about the network options, talk to us about what you think. We will also be holding a series of community conversations. These conversations will also be virtual meetings, and this is where we're really going to roll up our sleeves and talk about the service in depth. So we identified 10 regions or 10 sub areas or communities throughout the region: Northeast Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, West Philly, Delaware County, Montgomery County, South Philly, Bucks County, Northwest Philadelphia, Chester County, and Center City. And for each of these areas, we're going to have a virtual meeting that's targeted just for the services and the service changes in that sub area. Those events are mostly going to be on Thursdays at 6:30. They'll be about an hour. They will be interactive. So if you live in one of these neighborhoods, or you work in one of these, or you visit friends, and you want to roll up your sleeve, talk a little bit more about exactly what's on the table, what you like about them, what you don't like about that. These were going to be a great opportunity to call in. Here's a picture of the Join the Revolution bus, the Bus Revolution bus. So hopefully you'll be seeing that soon as well. There are 2 community conversations held on Tuesday, Bucks County and Chester County. All this information will be posted to the website, and there'll be an opportunity for you to go ahead and sign up for some of these meetings. We are also taking a very active role in working with community groups in each of these areas and some of the stakeholders to make sure that we get a lot of participation and representation at the meetings. So hopefully there's going to be a lot of chances for you to talk with us, to submit comments, to fill out the survey, to tell us what you think, and tell us, what you like and what you don't like. And then at the end, we have one more virtual transit talks that will be scheduled on another Revolutionary Day, July 14th at 6:30. And we won't be totally done with all the information and all the feedback that we will receive, but we'll be able to share some preliminary results and talk to you about what's next and when you can expect to see this draft recommendation that combines the best pieces of both of the network options. So with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing, and then Bev's going to help us with the questions and answers, or Henry, I think is maybe going to help.
Both of us will do it. But first, since we have over 200 people on the Zoom tonight, I have 2 very quick questions so that we can get a sense of who is in the session. So the first question, Henry, is how often do you use Septa buses? Select one choice, please. Almost every day, frequently, occasionally, rarely, or never. 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's end it. Okay, frequently, excellent. We're glad people in this session are using buses. The second question is, which part of the Septa region are you most familiar with? And these are the same as the areas that Bethany talked about in terms of the community conversations. So which part of the Septa region are you most familiar with? Please select one of these. I'll give you a couple more seconds for your answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, Henry. Okay, Center City, but a good representation from almost every part of the city. So thank you for that. We have 44 questions and about 20 minutes. So we know some of the questions are very similar. And Henry will select the questions now. And I'm sure he's already decided what his first question is going to be. Henry.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. We actually got 60 questions. I think about 20 of them have been answered by Dan in the chat. But yeah, we'll just, without further ado. So first question here, to what extent have you evaluated conditions for pedestrians in locations where riders would be required to walk further in order to reach a bus stop?
So I can go ahead and take a stab at that. And I think our usual format just for everybody is I'll take the first stab and then Dan can jump in, and Keaton, you should feel free to jump in as well. So in terms of the pedestrian network, we did do a market analysis where we primarily looked at density. Sometimes we can look at things like intersection density as a proxy for pedestrian environments. We haven't done that at this moment, but as we moved into the preferred network, that is something we could consider doing, but we did primarily focus on areas with density, that is the proxy for us in terms of the market and the need for transit service. And in some cases, we do know that the land use is not always great in those locations, but as we're doing the route evaluations, we looked at corridors and we did a lot of driving and looking at routes. We did a lot of Google Earth work as well. So we did look at maps a lot, but we didn't do any kind of comprehensive look at an assessment of the land use.
To jump in, I think that's a good question, and I think that something you'll hear a lot, probably, or maybe a little bit, is that we are sort of focusing on the two scenarios for this round. But as we move through this phase and into the sort of preferred phase later this year, we'll be getting more and more detailed about what we're looking at. So there was a question, like for example, about like stops and like changes to stops. That's something that we're going to get into later this year, but even more so next year as we enter the implementation preparations. For the pedestrian environment specifically, a lot of the work that we did to sort of develop these scenarios was sort of around the table talking about where the routes are going, what they're doing. And we did talk a lot about sort of people's ability to navigate by foot to get to bus stops. But you can anticipate a lot more on this front through the subsequent phases of the project as we sort of drill down into a preferred network option.
Great. We got a number of questions asking for clarification on microtransit. Just to go over just again what it is very simply. Also, can you use a Septa key card for microtransit? And as an example, how would microtransit travel work if you want to go from one zone to another, for example, Levittown in Bucks County to Community College in Newtown, for example?
Okay, yeah, so those are good questions. I was just thinking maybe I should bring the slides up again, but I'll try to answer it the best I can. And I know Dan may jump in, or maybe even Keaton as well. So microtransit is, it's the on-demand service, and it is designed for travel within the zone or a connection to the fixed route. So you are confined to that travel zone and or to connections to the fixed route service. We haven't worked out all the details, but this idea that you could use your key card is definitely something that we would like it to do. And then if you, just like you have a transfer between two fixed route services, you could transfer between microtransit and fixed route. If there's two adjacent microtransit zones, you probably could transfer between one microtransit to another. Some of the details we'll be working out as part of this study, but I think that those are the general ideas. Did I miss any of the questions that people were asking for?
The only thing I'd just to add,
Yeah.
we view microtransit as sort of it's a new mode. A lot of agencies are starting to experiment with it. We view it as an extension of our fixed route service, and like Bethany said, it's really to provide travel within a specifically designated zone or a connection to fixed route that includes buses, regional rail, et cetera. So this is something that's going to get fleshed out, and I think the type where we provide microtransit and how we provide it, we're going to be sorting through a lot over the next few months. We are working on a companion project, which is going to really get into the weeds about how it actually works at Septa. And you know, I'd invite everyone to sort of keep an eye out for that as well.
All right, now we're getting to some questions about frequencies here. I'm a bit disappointed in the 30-minute frequencies between 9 p.m. and midnight for 10-minute routes. That will likely be a major deterrent for ridership. Will that be reconsidered?
So I think, Dan, did you say you wanted to answer that one?
Yeah. So I think we're going to be looking again, like these are still pretty conceptual bus networks. As we refine and really drill down into this, we are going to get more detailed with the schedule. So that will include looking at service sort of later into the evening and on the weekends. We'll get there. I think what we're doing with this is providing sort of like a conceptual framework for people to understand, you know, if we can reallocate service, how would we do that? And these two networks do that. But we're going to get, you know, I agree with you. I think we'll need to look at frequency and how we provide greater frequency later at night and on the weekends, so that we're not, you know, shortchanging ourselves. But we're gonna get into that here. But I think this at a conceptual level, I think these two networks do sort of show how frequency can, you know, make such a big impact.
Right. And I would just add that the way that we did the networks right now is we treated all the 10 max routes the same. And it could be that some of the 10 max routes they warrant a higher frequency later into the evenings, but not all of them. But that level of detail we haven't taken yet. So as we move to the preferred network, we can add some of those bells and whistles back in and make sure that, but I think that's, as Dan said, I think that's a great comment. We definitely appreciate hearing that. And I think that that's a good one to log in for the comparisons as well.
Okay. It sounded like the 10 max routes should run at least every 10 minutes all day, including weekends, but the online tool shows 15-minute service for many 10 max routes on Saturday or Sunday. Is that a mistake? I know in your presentation you defined frequent service as 10 minutes or 15-minute routes. So you just clarify that. Yeah,
my understanding, it might be a mistake. We'll have to check that, but because I do think the 10 max routes are supposed to operate at 10 minutes on Saturdays and Sundays. So we'll take a look at that.
Great. Did you do an analysis for later on weekday evenings, for example, 8 p.m.?
So yes, we do have an analysis on in terms of how late the frequency should be or needs to be, and we have that information at a route level and at a market level or a neighborhood level. And as I mentioned earlier, I think with the network options the way that they are now, we just did really kind of blanket assumptions, and so we will be going through and deciding at a route by route level whether or not, you know, when the frequencies should, how long that 10 max or that 15 max category should last.
All right. To what extent will physically separated, dedicated, camera protected bus lanes fit into option 1 and option 2? I know we asked about bus only lanes in the fall. So. Right.
And bus only lanes are a great tool. They're a really important part of operating a frequent transit network and making sure that service is reliable. So this idea of the infrastructure investments and some of the other things that we've been talking about, family of service, transit signal priority, dedicated lanes, all of that we will be looking at and proposing as part of the final network, because right now we're looking at the 2 different ways that we could structure and design the networks. We haven't prioritized key corridors. I know that there's been some other work that the city of Philadelphia has done and Septa has been working on. We'll take a look at, we'll bring those pieces back into the bus revolution, start to prioritize those corridors for infrastructure investments, and sit back down with the stakeholders and start to work on some of those projects.
Great. This next question might have been asked before Keaton's story map walkthrough, but I think it's helpful just to ask again. So will there be an explanation of the route number schema displayed on the maps? I think a lot of the routes are operating under a different name in the options.
That is correct. And there is, I don't know, Keaton, if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about the route naming convention, but the idea, as Keaton mentioned, is they are they're a temporary way of us to organize and talk about the routes. And we're not proposing that those will be the route numbers or names moving forward. It's just a way for us to differentiate between the existing network and compare the two networks and use a convention that is easy to work with as part of this analysis.
Yep, that's exactly right. And then I'll just show one more time on the story map. Right above the interactive map, there's a lookup tool, so you can look up your existing route today and how it's referred to in the two network options.
Great. I'm curious to which option would benefit our senior community. It sounds like one of the options would require longer walking times. I noticed you mentioned how it affects residents, jobs, minorities, and low income on the weekends, but not the data on seniors, unless I missed that.
That's correct. We can do that calculation for older adults. I didn't show it tonight, in part just because I was trying to leave enough time for Q&A and not spend the whole time talking. But that is an evaluate, and we do have a bunch of metrics and evaluation material that we will be posting to the website. We just finished. We finished that up. We have to do a little bit more review on it, so people will be able to see that, and it will show you a lot of these metrics by different populations and how access increases or decreases for those folks. And I think which network option is better for older adults overall. It's hard to say, right? Older adults are not all the same. Some people, it is true network option 1 has longer walks, but depending on where you live, you may or may not have to walk further, or depending on what you're using Septa for, it may be a better network for you. So if, I hesitate to say one criteria is going to determine the success for a whole population of people. But yeah, I think if you're an older adult and you're on the call, take a look. Tell us what you think. We can answer some more questions about that if you have some specific ones.
All right, next question. You were able to expand access to high frequency routes, especially on weekends, with both options, which is great. It makes me wonder what constraints we should be thinking about when comparing or evaluating the two route options you've presented.
I can take that.
Perfect.
So the two biggest changes that differentiate the two service networks, actually, I think there are three. One is the amount of time that you'll be expected to wait for frequent service. And so you can see how network option 1 has way more routes that are operating at a minimum of 10 minutes a day. And so the way that you can think about that is you show up to your bus, the very longest you'll have to wait for a bus on a 10-minute network is 10 minutes. However, on network option 2, far more of the frequent service is operated as 15 max services. So that is an additional 5 minutes potentially for maximum wait time. Also, in network option 2, there are more routes operating, which means that a walk to any bus route is likely to be shorter. In network option 1, the network has been thinned out in order to focus service onto high frequency corridors. And so as a result, a walk to service on network option 1 is a little bit longer. So I think that's another trade-off that we're asking folks to grapple with. The third biggest change is the microtransit service option. And so especially in the suburbs, we want to gauge the public's comfort level with the microtransit, which is a far larger network in network option 1. And in network option 2, suburban service is provided by some things that's a little bit closer to what's offered today, which is an hourly route. So a fixed route that maybe you have to wait for a long time, but it's a really similar service to what you're experiencing today.
And I think can I add a couple things? I think one thing about network option 1 as compared to 2 is network option 1 has shorter routes. So there are cases where, for example, there are a handful of routes in Septa's existing system that we called them L routes, where they started from either the north or the south, and then they cut across Market Street and Center City. For a lot of those routes, we did not keep the L. Instead, sometimes we ran them all the way through from south to north, or if they were from Northeast Philadelphia, they came into West Philadelphia and then cut across on Market Street into Center City. We stopped them at 30th Street. So you would have to make we have a 10 max route that's operating on Market Street. So the idea was you'd come into 30th Street and then you could transfer to a 10 max route. So there are a few things that are really important to look at. There are key differences. I think at a high level, network option 1 looks really great, like you have all this frequent service, but there are things like that in there where you do have to we are assuming that people will transfer between routes. And so when you're evaluating them, we want to be really clear and transparent that those are things to think about. It will be a different type of transferring experience, because if you're transferring from a 10-minute route to a 10-minute route, it's probably going to be 5 minutes. So that should be super convenient for folks, but that is something that is in network option 2, we kept more of those L-shaped routes in the network. So if you use one of those, it's just a different trade-off. And so we're not saying one is better than the other. We want to show people both, and we would like you to tell us what you like about those.
We have 4 minutes left. So Henry, pick wisely, and responses, shorten them.
Okay, I really like this next question because it's about a topic that was really important to us in our last round of engagement. So I still see stops every block on Remix. Are we no longer considering expanding the distance between bus stops?
So I'll take the first stab at that. I'll try to be quick, Bev. So we're not really talking about bus stop consolidation at this point. Again, I think once we get to a preferred network or draft recommendations, and we're looking at each of the routes individually, we will decide, or we will propose a stop consolidation or stops strategy. We know that stop consolidation is very important. Septa has a lot of bus stops. We expect to talk about that, but that's not part of the trade-offs between these two networks right now.
Excellent.
Yeah, so just to clarify, that trade-off was less bus stops to have faster buses. So this next question, I think, is also asking, are both options decreasing overall stops on routes? Frequent stops seem to slow down service. So I'm wondering if bus stop consolidation is part of these plans too. So maybe just a little clarification of what goes into making buses more frequent on a particular route if it's not bus stop spacing at this point.
Right. It's about the frequent. So the person who wrote that question is absolutely right. Too many stops slows down the bus. It also impacts the reliability of the service. Those are things we know are super important. Right now, when we can say that we think that travel times are reduced and reliability is improved. Most of that comes from the power of the frequency of the service. So because the buses are coming more often, you're waiting shorter amounts of time, and you should be getting to your destination faster. But bus stop consolidation is a key part of the bus revolution. We know we're going to talk about it. We'll be bringing back that into the fall. And yeah, I don't want to get into it too much because we're really focusing on the network designs at this moment. But I do, yes, absolutely. We talked about infrastructure a little bit, one of the previous questions. This idea of bus stop consolidation, also really important, and they are part of the bus revolution. But just at this moment, we're talking about the network designs.
We have time for one more question. Unless, Dan, did you have a follow-up to that? Okay. Henry, one more question.
I think this is an important question to clarify. So some routes appear missing in the options, but I'm assuming that means the route is discontinued, but it would have to be, there would be a simpler way or easier. So I lost track of this question, but I think they're asking about routes on the story map that appear missing. What happened to those? What are the alternatives?
Right. So it is true. Like we did a crosswalk, like a where's my route that we're going to be sharing with folks and the engagement teams. In some case, In some cases, the route is eliminated, right? Like we're going to serve the area with a different route or in a different way, and there was no similar route to it. In some cases, the route's replaced by microtransit, or some cases it's a combination. So if you're used to getting a route on a certain street, you could use the remix map to dive in and look at that street and see where the closest bus route is. You can also, I think that's probably the best way, Keaton.
Yep, exactly. And I think it's hard to provide a comprehensive list because some routes like Route 1, which operate all the way from Northeast Philly all the way into West Philly, are shown as discontinued, but in reality, portions of that route all portions of the route are served, but by a number of different routes. So
I love that where's my route chart that you made up. That's great.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be very helpful and transparent to people. There's a lot of information in it.
Good.
Okay, Dan, do you want to play us out?
Yeah. So thanks everybody. Like Bev said, this was number 5 in a sort of a long series of transit talks. We'll be with you the rest of the year. This is a really crucial phase of the project, and I can't thank you all enough for sort of, coming, kind of walking through a really sort of challenging set of information, and kudos to Keaton. He did a really good job of kind of walking everyone through all of this work. We love the tough questions. Hopefully we got to some of them. We'll try to get to more. Keep them coming. Feel free to email us, or just provide feedback on the various tools we provided. But definitely, tell your friends, come to the pop-ups, come to the community conversations, and let us know how we're doing. Thanks, and have a great evening.